Well, I know this very, very well because I've committed this time and time again, and I think, turned the corner and kind of learned my lesson. We overcomplicate everything. And we try to make everything, right? We want to dig into the numbers. We want to get into the weeds. But when we overcomplicate things, it takes away agility. And to me, agility is like one of the number one things that a great finance team can provide the business.
Nice. You heard it here first. That's a fire moment right here. Agility in the finance organization is everything. Fire moment, right? Hello. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another Collectiv Conversation. Collectiv Conversation, we have the opportunity to talk with so many different accounting, finance, FP&A, CFO, and technical leaders across the globe. I'm super excited. I've always been a fan of Steven. Really excited to have you here on Collectiv Conversations. Steven, welcome to Collectiv Conversations.
Thanks, Chris. I'm pumped to be here today.
Awesome. Hey man, I know we're heading into this year and budgets are done. Maybe people are rolling into their new replan, right? Because all those budgets are thrown out the windows, right? One of the topics I want to talk about here today with you is the new frontier of budgeting, forecasting, and planning, right? The annual processes, like that takes so much time. I had the opportunity to do these budgets and actually like help some clients work through it. And the amount of time, energy, and effort that goes into this annual budget process that typically a lot of organizations start in Q3 or Q4. They ended sometime in Thanksgiving or Christmas, or you still may be going through it right now. But they spend all this time, energy, and effort. And then you get into a couple months outside the new year, and those budgets are completely worthless. So what has been your experience in working with organizations around the annual and budgeting forecasting cycles?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'll kind of start with some of the experiences I've had in my career. So I've worked at Fortune 500, big companies, worked at a really big airline right out of school. And it was exactly what you described. It was like this crazy intensive process. And it was like all these spreadsheets and all these line items. And like, you were just grinding and working till like 8, 9 o'clock at night. And then, and then it would like you get to Thanksgiving and you submit it and you're done. And then all of a sudden you get into Q1 of next year and you're like, oh yeah, that budget's already shot. Like it's already gone. It's already out the window. So that was my experience at a bigger company. Now I've had the opportunity to work at more startups and smaller companies, even some small nonprofits. And what I have seen in that realm is more of the rolling forecast. And you might lock a forecast at a point in time and measure against it, but it's more of like this, more of a fluid planning process.
Yeah, most definitely. And like, I remember working at a large enterprise pharmaceutical drug development company, and our budgeting process, even our rolling forecasting process, when we do our replan, will still take a month and a half, right? Because you had to get all the divisional leaders, you had to coordinate with all the local FP&A teams, then you had to coordinate with all the HR teams, right? You had to reorientate what we say we're going to do and now what the change of position is going to be. But when you, like you said, when you take that down to a smaller SMB kind of company, you actually trade in a lot of that agility, right? Because now you're directly working with those key stakeholders, you're directly working with the revenue leaders, the marketing leaders, the HR leaders. And like, I think one of the biggest steps that you can have in making that shift from this antiquated, like forward annual budgeting process to the rolling forecast model is that buy-in from the business. So tell me about an experience that you had in that rolling forecast. How do you keep them in those connective points? Like, we did the annual budget, here's the reset that we're doing, here's the rolling forecast. How do you bring that collaboration and bring that agility into that planning cycle?
Yeah, it's a great question. In my experience, there's always this like natural tension between finance and usually like other parts of the business. It's like finance is just going to say no, or finance is just going to, they're going to find a reason that we can't spend or invest in something like. And so to me, one of the best ways to do this is just to communicate or to really find a common goal. That you can unite around and say, look, I'm here to help. I'm here to make sure we get this organization from A to B and make sure we just put these amazing ideas, these amazing dreams on paper so that we can go execute on these things. And so I think finding that common goal to say, hey, we're on the same team here. I bring a different skill set. You bring a different skill set. I think that is a great kind of first step in the process. And just communicating to them, like, we're partners in this. Like we're trying to get to the same place. We want to grow this business. We want to grow revenue. We want to, whatever the goal might be. And I think that's the first step.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you 100%. Building that common ground is, and to me, I think even expanding on it, like not only knowing the common ground, but like the ground that they're walking on changes, right? Like the business could have been, like if you're doing it last year, right? You were walking on ground that maybe had snow on it. Now you're walking in the springtime. The ground that you're walking on is, it's getting a little bit more ripe. It's getting a little bit more warmer. So the ground is different, right? Like what have been some of those framework and theories around planning that you've seen have been really, really advantageous to build that connecting ground in the business?
I would say when I first kind of got into this early in my career, I thought the only way to do this is from a bottom up approach. You got to go super detailed. You got to do every single initiative, every line item to the nth degree. And what I have seen and just kind of some of the experience I've gained is that there's different frameworks really truly work for different organizations. And then like another layer. And I hate that answer because it's like, well, it depends. I kind of sound like a lawyer a little bit. Like,
no, Stevie, you sound like a true finance person. Like an accountant would have been like, nope, there's only one way of do this. It's black and white. It is a bottoms up approach. You need to tie out every penny. You need to do this. Yep. No, you sound like a true FP&A person. Because I love it. I love it.
You're spot on. Whether it's continuous budgeting where you just add the month on at the end and you just keep like budgeting a month at a time in the future. Zero-based budgeting can work for a lot of companies where it's like you basically start and say, okay, everything has to now be justified to make it back into the budget versus just saying, well, we're going to just assume like we're going to spend this in marketing. Like everything has to be justified. That's a much more time intensive framework, but it's a great exercise if you're trying to cut costs, because you literally go like every line item and try to figure out what is truly core to the business, what is maybe nice to have, but we don't necessarily need it. I think the continuous budgeting method is honestly one that I'm a big fan of just because it's fluid and it's so interesting. We try to box the budget into like this 12-month like arbitrary period or whatever period you're budgeting. But the reality is that's not how business works. I mean, it's always like business is always moving. So I don't know. That's one of I would say if I were to pick one, I love the continuous framework.
Nice. The other budget framework that I've seen that kind of morphs into it is like the driver-based one, right? This is really, I think like to me, a really challenging budgeting or planning or forecasting framework for anybody, right? I always challenge a lot of CEOs, a lot of board members, a lot of founders, a lot of CROs to say, hey, can you distill down your business into 3 to 5 drivers of the entire business? Because a driver-based planning doesn't mean that you go like 40 different drivers that you're going to be looking at, right? Because my question is like, okay, you do a driver-based plan with 40 different variables. How can you reasonably have strategies, tactics, metric, milestones to fix and improve all 40 of those, right? And this leads to like another question I want to ask is like, what are some of those pitfalls or some of those experiences that you've had in your career where you're like, man, I wish I would have known this and this could have accelerated us implementing continuous planning or a more clear and concise driver-based forecasting. What are some of those pitfalls that you've seen?
Well, I know this very, very well because I've committed this time and time again. And I finally, I think, turned the corner and kind of learned my lesson. We overcomplicate everything. And we try to make everything, right? We want to dig into the numbers. We want to get into the weeds. But when we overcomplicate things, it takes away agility. And to me, agility is like one of the number one things that a great finance team can provide the business. In today's world where change happens so fast, the agility is the key piece. So it's fighting that natural urge. And it might be how you're naturally wired. I think a lot of us finance people are wired this way. Fighting that natural urge to overcomplicate. And to go back to your driver based approach you mentioned earlier, it's finding out what are those 3 to 5 like kind of big fulcrum things in your business that if you move the needle on these 3 to 5 things, the rest of it falls into place. And when you get out of the details, it brings so much clarity into where you need to focus your attention in the business.
Nice. You heard it here first. That's a fire moment right here. Agility in the finance organization is everything. Fire moment,
Yep.
right? And another thing,
Yep.
Stephen, I would add too is like I loved your fact pattern that you said around that, because when you think about us finance, right, we want to be the perfectionist, right? We want to make sure we trace and agree every single number. What I think it boils down to is the balance between accuracy and precision coupled with a time horizon, right? So like, for example, when I think of accuracy, I think of like it's directionally moving in the right way, right? Like I'm 60 to 75% confident that the number, the strategy, the tactic, the milestone, the metric that I'm talking about is going to directionally move in this way.
Yeah.
Precision is like that 95, 97% confidence that it is going to move this exact reason, right? I want to have precision on these 3 to 5 metrics in the next 90 days. Because
There you go.
realistically, that's the time horizon that organizations are operating in right now.
Can I add one thing to that? And I
Of
love using
course.
this example because I think it drives it home. I haven't even got my personal budget like super like right on target. And if I can't get a personal budget on target, there's no chance you're going to get a business budget on like right on target. So I love using that example because I think it just hits home.
Could you imagine having that personal budget and it'd be like a conversation with like your wife or your significant other or your kids, and your kids come to you, hey dad, I was looking at our income margin and you're outside of a 10% deviation to the original plan. Can you please send me a commentary and explain how we overcome this
Yeah.
deficit and what it means for the future, right? Like, like
Yeah.
now,
You're
if
like,
that's not going to work with your family, if that's not going to work with your significant other, your wife, your husband, your
yeah.
kids, why do we take
Yeah.
that same approach to the business? Like, why do we go do that in the business, right?
Yeah.
We come in and say, hey, like revenue's down like 5%. Can you please explain to me within a relevant range, what are the core drivers of this 5%? It's like nobody like,
Yeah. I was just gonna add one more thing to that, too. It's like the I forget, I saw this on LinkedIn. I cannot remember who said it, but essentially like the value in doing the budgeting or forecasting process is, I think you hit on this earlier. It's not necessarily the accuracy. Obviously you want to get it close. You want to make sure it's directional. You want to, but it's the fact that you are intentionally saying, hey, we're going to pause for a minute. We're going to get everybody in the room. We're going to talk about where we want to go. Like that to me is like the core value of the budget and forecast process.
yeah, 100%. There's a saying, and I don't know who says it. Like, there's a famous saying: if you want to move fast, move alone. If you want to move further,
Hmm.
move together. And I agree 100%. Like, too many times, finance organizations, we want to move fast and we want to have everybody like, you got to balance one or the other. So I agree to that. Like, and also like expanding upon it more, like you're deep in the FP&A space. I as well, coming from that space. Like when you think about the role that technology has in helping like build that collaboration, build that connection, build that like common ground that you mentioned inside the business, what has been like your viewpoint and your insights, the way that technology can help supplement implementing some of these best practices around budgeting, forecasting, and planning?
Early in my career, during the budget process, it was a lot of like, hey, finance, can you pull this report for me? Or, hey, can you tell me like what this number is or what invoice? Like it was just all like kind of in the weeds. And like, I think technology has really improved that like speed, in not having to just rely on like the finance team as like the data gatherer. Everybody has on-demand visibility into a forecast at any given time. Like I think a lot of these things help in the planning process.
100%. And I think like technology for even for the office of the CFO, like traditionally when you look
Yeah.
at the legacy that the finance organization and most CFOs have had when it comes to technology, we're usually the technology laggers, right? Like we have
Yeah.
this whole checklist of stuff that we have to go through. It has to be audit compliant. It has to be risk compliant. It has to have like a SOC 12 audit. It has to be, all these certifications, right? And now we're shifting to more of like, how is this technology going to be able to help us collaborate the business? How's it going to be able to connect the business? How's it going to be able to like not just report the numbers, but like instill action, right? And when I think of finance teams that are really those top tier valued advisors in the business, they're not leveraging technology to just regurgitate the numbers. They're leveraging technologies either to automate low value activities, right? And standardize and optimize those low value activities to have a North Star in communication. And they're also leveraging that technology to give people the action that they need, right? Like telling the numbers and just regurgitating what budget actuals are, that's status quo.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. It's and I think you hit on too. It's like if your finance team is using their time to do low value time, like pulling a report, or you'd rather have them being like, okay, well, what's our CAC look like? Yeah. And how can we like drive our customer acquisition costs down? How can we be more efficient with these dollars? You'd rather the time spent on that stuff than, reporting or, any of the other stuff.
Boom, another fire moment right there. Balance technology to not have your people in these low value activities, have them in the high value activities that is driving action inside the organization. Fire moment right there. One thing I always like to ask guests, as you're looking forward to the rest of this year, right? If you were to go into your FP&A crystal ball and you were to look at it and say, hey man, for those top 5%, for those FP&A teams that are looking to really level up their game, what are 3 areas that they should be focusing on for the rest of the year to really update and upskill their FP&A function?
I don't want to be cliche here, but I'm gonna say people. Big thing that I like to talk about is like our young finance people and like kind of how they can upskill and how they can like level up. And so I just think there's so much untapped potential where if we people who are more senior in the industry, like really focused on how to intentionally, guide or, mentor the younger people in the industry, I think there's a ton of untapped potential there. So it's not like the sexy like 2023 answer because it's probably like tech, but I think the teams that focus on people first are going to be the ones that win moving forward.
Nice. You heard it here from everybody, from Steven. We got to put the right P back in FP&A. And that's not planning. That is people. Put that as the right. That's 3 times the people. So you got to, it's FP like triple down A, like a whole new recipe of FP&A. Steven, Thank you so much for sharing your insights. If other people want to follow you, learn more about what you're doing, learn more about GrowthLab Financial, where can they find you? How can they learn more about you?
Check me out on LinkedIn, Steven Newland on LinkedIn. I love posting about how to help young people in their finance career, kind of level up and things that I wish I would have had somebody tell me, 10, 15 years ago.
Go make sure to like, comment, follow, and connect with Steven. Steven, thank you so much for joining another Collectiv Conversation. And thank you. Thank you for looking and looking at this video. Thank you for looking through Collectiv Conversations. Make sure you like, comment, follow, subscribe, and make sure you click the bell on the Collectiv YouTube channel. That way make sure you get all future updated Collectiv Conversations. Steven, thank you so much for your time, man. Really appreciate it.
This was awesome, man. Thanks for having me today.